Here follows a reading from my debut novel, Starborn, Vendetta. File 1. Birth of Prisoner 74. All the worlds mourn when a woman's virtue is taken. All the worlds rejoice when a man suffers a similar fate. This inequality of the sexes is an overlooked aspect of our modern times. While not to be encouraged to the degree of returning to the bad old days of women being second in all things, true gender equality should merit an equal quota of both sympathy and condemnation when discussing male and female characters. None should be exempt. Extract from Fingal D's Views on Devolved Morality. The prison transport shuttle Hypnos cast its shadow across the sunward windows of the Deef. In docking port 5, Squad Captain Gaspard Atarex opened a comm channel to the ship's captain. "You're late again." Gaspard's flat accents were not polite. Working in a prison would dent even the toughest of hearts, removing care and softening. Long forgotten were the days of courtesy, of natural politeness that sorted the green from the grizzled. The ship captain of prison transport shuttle Hypnos was not in the mood for Gaspard's manner. Late again," came the echoing, angered reply through the comm. "I don't need you to tell us that. Why the hell did the warp engine have to fail like that? At least we got here, but who's going to get it in their bonus?" "Not you, that's for sure. Get ready for your approach to docking port 5. Docking port 5, copy." Gaspard looked through the dock windows of the Hypnos, its rough exterior matching the decrepit look of prison station Deef. This place, with its visiting barges of infamy, had been his home for 5 years. Built inside an asteroid and named after an infamous ancient Earth prison, the Deef orbited the Ares twin star system, human-run, human-powered, staffed mostly by fellas who could be trusted to keep quiet. Prisoners from all the cluster peoples were kept here, prisoners too dangerous or embarrassing to be kept anywhere else. It was here they were sent to be forgotten, along with the guards and staff assigned to them. This was his home, his own little prison, though he walked free among the entrapped. If possible, he would have left years ago, but in the outer worlds, who would accept him? A fellas without a tribe, without any affiliation beyond himself. No one trusted such as he. Scum worse than the lowest, no spine or scruples. He didn't deceive himself of that, but accepted it as who he was. The same routine as in previous years played out like a piece of stock footage in a long-running series. The Hypnos' warp rings powered down, docking signals were exchanged, and thrusters gently guided it towards docking port 5. The twin stars' unfiltered sunlight threw the scene into cruel relief, giving shadows edges sharper than tempered steel. The Hypnos was not pretty, an outdated blue-class passenger freighter with rocky warp systems. Beyond the capital worlds, older models were more common and kept maintained within tight schedules and tighter budgets. "Breakdowns, the voice came through on the comm again. "At least this place needs it too. Doesn't get the funding it used to." Time blurred momentarily. Gaspard lost himself in musings and little mental rituals, willing away the minutes of monotonous boredom that had long since crushed his soul into the mould of squad captain. Clearance codes being transmitted, the light of Ares blocked out by the ship's bulk, the docking ports connecting, thrusters disengaging. Like the combination to a well-rehearsed act, the pantomime of his life. The docking procedure was completed, and a few crew people from the Hypnos appeared ahead of the prisoners being shuffled along like the cargo they were. One of the crew was an engineer Gaspard recognized from earlier trips, a fellas like himself. She noticed him, and he waved in a pathetic imitation of normality. He didn't bother deceiving himself. This place wasn't normal, it was abnormal. Anyone trying to be normal here was only imitating, and poorly at that. "Hi there." The female fellows approached with a springing gait, fiddling with the matted locks of her mane and scruffiness of her fur. We're all done out here in the outer worlds. How many times do I have to get assigned to this bloody run before I qualify for an upgrade? Seriously need a shower. When I get to the next space habitat, I'm not going to leave my bath for an hour. Gaspard wrinkled his nose at the crew person's odour. Sweat mingled with engine fluids and the natural neglect born from near constant overtime. You may have to change the water a few times. What are the cargo like? Mostly the usual. Sullen, meek, and foul-mouthed. So more of the usual shit. That's just great. Like we haven't got enough here already. Mediocrity persisting for yet another day, draining his self even more. The engineer was still talking, letting fly traces of outside normality as the latest batch of prisoners were shunted inside. Only 9 this time, surrounded by the tired-looking corps with rifles looking older than the skirmishers. They were a sorry lot, wearing tattered prison scruffs given after being stripped by security during the transfer between capital and outer territories. All walked with heads bowed, their spirits broken. No, that was wrong. Not all. 8 were as lowly and subservient as others before them, but the 9th was different. Gaspard's ear twitched, his curiosity piqued at that 9th figure. Who's that there? That tall human female in the middle. She's different. The engineer looked. I did say they were mostly usual. She's the exception. Got to look at her old clothes before they were taken for recycling. Very fine. Good quality stuff. Natural fibres, not synthetic stuff off the street. Look tailor-made. Know her name? No names after processing, you know that. And we're not allowed to talk to them. Pity. If Witten has his way, she'll only be a number soon, or less. Just thinking about the warden brought a little sick to the back of Gaspard's throat. The human chief of the Deef, a detestable little wart and figurative king among scum. If Gaspard were anyone or anything else, he would be away and working for someone else. But he wasn't, so he stayed. Brushing away Witten's ugly presence and his own burdens from his mind, Gaspard refocused on the woman. A special one. Yes, she had something special. Had been someone who didn't bow and nod politely, but commanded and expected obedience. Not like the others. Those sorry, cowering, colourless wrecks. Even the other guards. Even him. As the prisoners were scanned, he took in every discernible detail. Dark-skinned, a lush head of chestnut hair, slim without being weak, a figure alluring but modest. She held herself upright and looked about her with a stiff grace all the others lacked. This alone turned her colourless convict clothes into almost a badge of honour and dignity. What stood out most were the markings across the right side of her face. Flat and thin keloid scars, like scratch marks or narrow burns, accentuating rather than marring her charisma. All the time Gaspard stared, the woman's eyes were scanning the room, taking in every detail. Suddenly, without warning, her eyes focused on him. It took all of Gaspard's willpower to restrain an involuntary salute. Clenching his hand into a fist behind his back, he spoke with more emotion than he'd used in years. I wish she hadn't been sent here. She's dangerous. That kind of authority could rally the other prisoners. I'll advise she be put into solitary confinement for the duration of her imprisonment. That's probably wise, but I'm not sure she's a threat. Really? Why? You didn't see her on the journey here. She looks in control now, quite poised in fact. But while we were en route, when I was on an errand near them, she looked deflated, as if she'd been winded and hadn't recovered. Meek Gaspard may have been, but when his eyes saw, they saw truly. Beneath the woman's regal facade there festered a layer of fresh despair and anger smothering who she might have been. Her eyes were harsh from some deep hurt, her hands clenched and unclenched in subtle motions, and at times she struggled to retain that poise. She was marshalling her entire will into restraining some strong emotion. Was she fighting like those bouts in the arena on the clusternet? Maybe even fighting for her life? With the prisoner exchange finalized, the Hypnos crew were allowed to depart, relieved their last delivery of the working year was over. It didn't take long for everything to be done. It never did. Speed was the essence of keeping prisoners in line, away from the temptations of ship hijacking. The prisoners remained in the holding area until the Hypnos was beyond the buffer zone and jumped into warp. Within the day, the Hypnos was light years away, leaving Gaspard on the Deef alone in the Ares system, superheated giants his only unchanging companions. The prisoners were lined up in the processing chamber. Gaspard stood behind prison governor Witten Mondego, who looked over the newcomers like a merchant eyeing produce. The 9 looked exhausted, with only the woman holding herself straight, eyes focused on the near invisible figures behind the lights. Witten was focusing on her above the others. Again, her presence, her strength of will, even under this glaring light and open depersonalization, overawed him. She had become an imposing and untouchable figure, a towering vertebrate amongst cowering worms. Witten pointed at her. "Who's the human girl?" Gaspard yanked his attention away with an effort. He repeated his ignorance, a guarded version of his opinion. Witten smiled unpleasantly. Gaspard understood the expression and suppressed a groan. The warden's unchained libido was as deplorable as his manners. Gaspard put all the conviction possible into his words. "I presumed being in the solitary wing might be best. That is, until we've got a better idea of who she is now, not who she was when sentence was passed." "I think that's a wise suggestion. Talking of newcomers, has the ambassador arrived?" Gaspard knew full well to whom Witten was referring, and again felt a little sick. Fudoshis Azlafu, a senior administrator and ambassador for the Kavki people, assigned to a sector of the capital worlds. Witten may have used her formal title, but he showed little reverence or respect, only contempt. Regardless of Lafu's reputation, even Gaspard knew to show the proper respect to his betters. "No, she hasn't. She cancelled her visit." Witten scowled. "A good client she may be, but I sometimes wish we'd have someone more reliable with their visits and purchases. She's so busy with administration these days, who knows when she'll—" He pulled himself together. "Move those prime picks back to their cells, and make sure they're not damaged. Also... He smiled a little, looking at the scarred woman. "I'd like to see her in my offices immediately." "Yes, sir." Gaspard knew what was coming. Female inmates were often sized up by Witten just in case. He struggled to compose his face as he left, but didn't stop himself punching a convenient chair back when no one else could see. It wasn't much, but it stopped him releasing his fists onto the prisoners or guards, or Witten. Within the hour, he was escorting the woman into Witten's private office. On the point of leaving, Witten recalled him. "Just a moment. I think you'd better stay." Even as he closed the door, Gaspard heartily wished himself 1,000,000 miles away. Witten tripped the lockdown function, sealing the office off from the outside world. Gaspard settled into a corner. He hated what was coming, but dared not intercede. He could only watch, a powerless spectator. The prisoner's eyes met Witten's with an implacable steeliness. The warden got up from his desk and circled the woman, giving her body looks which made Gaspard's stomach churn. Witten was obviously impressed. All the others he had summed up in this degrading manner would cower, cringe, or flinch as he moved close to them. A few even gave in and pleaded in some manner before he had risen from his chair. This one remained erect and impassive. As he placed a hand on her shoulder, Gaspard could have sworn there was the slightest twinge, a muscle spasm quickly suppressed. Witten spoke softly, using the voice of a father or a lover rather than a warden. "You're quite a woman." The woman remained silent, although the corner of her mouth briefly lifted into what Gaspard could only interpret as a contemptuous smirk. Or she was struggling to contain a flattered smile? Best to consider both possibilities until he knew more. Witten, ignorant of the expression, continued to speak. "Your control is admirable. How you're holding up is a mystery to me. I've met many women in my time, but you're the only one to remain so calm." He circled her again, still trying to figure her out. It must have been like looking at a bulkhead without markings and trying to judge its age or manufacturer. Gaspard and Witten saw the clue at the same moment, a small line of tattooed markings across the edge of her hairline. Her height could be placed among 6 tribes, her colouring among twice that, but those marks made it certain. "So you're from Argo?" Witten was not bothering to hide his contempt. "A moon filled with softies, I'd thought. But then, I'm an outlander, so what would I know? You know, you're more composed than all the other prisoners in this place put together. Where are you from? What did you do?" He bent close, his mouth creasing into a winning smile. "What's your name?" The woman remained silent, but looked directly at the warden. There was a clear contempt in her eyes. Gaspard could have cheered as Witten's gorge rose at this defiance. He clenched his hand until the palm almost bled as Witten placed a hand on her shoulder, allowing it to drift up towards her pulsing jugular. He felt what Gaspard had seen with narrowed eyes, the slight trace of nanotech implants lying beneath the skin. If he knew anything about the Deef and its population, he knew the size and fragility of Witten's ego. He refused to be denied by anyone, especially someone he wanted. He had never been denied before and would not take it well now, and Gaspard was powerless. But why did he even want to do anything? Why now, after all these years? Witten's voice punctured Gaspard's thoughts. "Such a fine form you have, well-toned and firm. You're the kind men would fight for in older times. A shame if such a form went to waste or withered away in a cramped little cell. But if you do come across, I can give you so many things. And I must tell you, no one resists me for long, You're right!" Witten was visibly shocked by her voice, and Gaspard's heart skipped as an overexcited child. The voice held a medium tone, but its regal accent and timbre of authority made him start. Witten pulled his hand away and sat behind his desk once more. "Right about what?" "My place of origin. And on Argo we have a saying, 'He who seeks the unaffordable knows only disappointment.'" The sting in her words was powerful. Gaspard felt the command of generations behind it, stirring his moribund senses. She was not just a woman, she was power and majesty. In a world of insects she towered over all as a majestic predatory bird. Struggling to keep his composure, Witten picked up a datapad and flicked through its contents. "You've got 2 options ahead of you. One has a cell in the solitary wing with only 2 meals per day and no human contact whatsoever, aside from myself for your yearly review and one chosen non-human guard. Any insubordination or violent acts will see you confined automatically to the punishment cells. The second option is a cell in low security, good conditions, light work, comfortable furnishings, and my personal attentions." Witten clearly expected her to cave. Most of the others had. Those same promises whispered to them, and they had given themselves willingly. Well, the human ones. Witten preferred humans, not the few alien females kept in this place. Those could rot with the others in the Deef's overcrowded factory level for all Witten cared. Gaspard struggled to retain his composure, and Witten's face blackened abruptly. Where in others there had been a submission and a forced sensuality, here there was only defiance. The woman remained aloof, proud, undaunted. Witten drew himself up to his full height, demonstrating more forcibly that she was several inches taller than nearly every other human on the Deef. "It's unwise to antagonize me, my dear. You realize that, don't you?" Witten's voice had become normal, a hard tone without empathy. "You're not your own person here. If I want, you'll be known and talked of only as a number, 2 digits, if you're lucky. Here I'm the supreme ruler. If you want to use archaic terms, I'm the king of the Deef. And you're all, guards and prisoners alike, my subjects." The words seemed to sting her, as they did Gaspard. Witten must have thought himself a king before, but using it so openly was rare. This woman, who stood like a rock against the tide, seemed to shift a little under this analogy. For a moment Witten smiled, thinking he had succeeded in breaking through her shell. Instead she focused her gaze upon him, and her voice became venomous. "Your use of the word king disrespects it in every possible way. You're no king, Warden, merely the petty tyrant of a backwater prison, and I will never kneel before a tyrant, for as anyone knows, in history, a tyrant will inevitably be overthrown. The day I accept your attentions, or even call you by your name, Warden, is the day you will lie dead at my feet." Oh shit, now she had done it. Witten turned purple with fury, rounding the desk and slapping the woman hard across the face. Her scarred cheek came up in an ugly red welt, and Gaspard's own cheek sang in sympathetic agony. Witten spoke again, his tone darker than he had ever heard it before. It made Gaspard feel small, a little ant in a vast colony under the absolute rule of its king. "I'll make you regret the day you were born, girl. You'll be getting worse than normal solitary. Count on it. You're not a woman anymore. You're an object, a number. You're prisoner 74, unless you reconsider." The woman smiled. "I don't. And as prisoner 74 I shall survive, Warden, until the tyrants fall." There came another hard slap across the other cheek, another sting of pain in Gaspard's mind. Then the lockdown was lifted, and Witten ordered her to be taken to the most remote cell of the solitary wing. Gaspard was recalled with a sharp command. "Squad Captain Atarex, take prisoner 74 for processing. You're to stay with her at all times. Report back to me when it's done. I want to know how she takes it." Like an automaton, Gaspard ushered prisoner 74 along 2 corridors into a padded cell with a reclining chair. Strapped into it, she was stoically helpless as a female doctor entered and first injected a general antivirus and antiseptic, then got a chip gun and punched the tiny tracking capsule into her right shoulder. Was that a slight wince registering at the corner of her eye? As much as he wanted to look away, Gaspard kept his eyes on the helpless form. The doctor then got a thin shock collar and looped it round the woman's neck, fastening it snugly before activating its contact welding strips to fuse plastic to plastic, locking the collar in place. Then further injections, including another layer of tracking using nanomachines. The woman more clearly suppressed the winces of pain as each procedure took place. Gaspard could barely stand the unfolding scene. Pained empathy clashed with his duty and the bewilderment at these stagnant feelings reborn by a human woman. Words flowed in his head, taking the place of tears from his eyes. "Please, please, please, gods beyond, let it end. Let anyone else suffer this, but not her, not this one." The procedures complete, Gaspard escorted prisoner 74 to a large transport pod. The transport tube's walls were transparent, giving her a view on several portions of the deep as they cruised along. In one section, human males were kept. A wrestling match was being staged, where it looked like the loser was being slowly choked to death. Another part of the prison housed the male non-human occupants. The female part of the prison passed unseen behind them. Gaspard clenched his hands, focusing his eyes on the near distance. The reflection glared back at him in sullen mockery. To many looking on, he presumed himself not too poor a sight to behold, at least for any of the fellas in the deep. A muscular form supported by wrapped, digitigrade legs, soft grey fur showing around his prison uniform, the dye-cleaned mane of the casteless cropped short aside from a single long strand falling above his emerald eyes. Even his face had its qualities, though many humans saw only an echo of the tiger of ancient earth. Every day he glimpsed his reflection somewhere, and sought in it an iota of worth. In the solitary wing, cells large and small held the deep's most dangerous inmates, or those who had roused Witten's anger. Prisoner 74's cell was the last in the wing, slotted against the station's exterior wall. Its roof was sloped, so the only place to stand up straight was pressed hard against the interior wall. The bed was in one corner, the bathroom and facilities in a tiny adjoining cubicle. It was a pitiful little place, a mockery of home. Gaspard all but pushed prisoner 74 inside. As the force field door hummed into life, his growling voice spoke above the noise. It sounded forced to his own ears, as if he were acting out a mocking version of himself in a play. "We should be clear about who and what you'll be here, Prisoner 74. You're not a person now, just a number. Ever seen that Human A show? Quite fitting. Someone who defied the state, stripped of all identity. A toilet with a shower and sink, a bed, and this door to look through. That's your world. You'll be given 2 meals a day. Won't taste good, but they'll keep you alive. And don't try crossing this field. Do it, and you'll get some very nasty burns. Only we can deactivate it. And don't think of charming us either." He grinned without malice, surprising himself. "I, for one, don't swing your way." The woman looked hard at him, frowning a little. "What's your name?" "Excuse me?" "I think you heard what I said." "Trying to get to me?" "No. It's just that when I get out and meet you again, and you aren't in my good books, I'll want to know who I'll be punishing." The response and its serious delivery made Gaspard's spirit at once jump and quell. He glanced at the field, which showed strong. He began shuffling away slightly, but the woman's eyes followed him. Eventually he shrugged and replied, his voice shaking a little. "What the hell? You're not getting out anyway. The name's Gaspard. Gaspard Atarex." With this final remark, Gaspard moved out of sight. Back in his office, on an impulse, he activated the small hidden camera in Prisoner 74's cell. He had to see her without that look, without her being able to see him. He must know what she was really like. What appeared shocked him more than her in the flesh. As the view flickered into life, Prisoner 74 was slumped on the bed, her poise fallen, tears of some strong emotion creeping down from her eyes. She snapped erect as the observation drone passed, turned and moved away again. Alone, she crumpled once more, head sagging between her knees, the picture of despair. Another impulse made Gaspard switch on the audio feed for a few seconds. He heard no sobs, no telltale signs of grief or despair. His ears were stung by words suffused with tones of purest rage. That level voice, which had awoken his heart, now shook with a raw emotion, something he had never heard before. He distinguished a name amid the woman's emotive growls. "Duncan Vaughan Solari." She was repeating it over and over again like a prayer. "Duncan Vaughan Solari, Duncan Vaughan Solari, Duncan Vaughan Solari, Duncan Vaughan Solari, Duncan Vaughan Solari." He shot off both visual and audio. Sweat was flowing from him, tickling at the skin under his fur. Seated at that console, he breathed hard like someone who had been running for his life, or running towards something. He stared at the controls, at where the woman's face and voice had been projected. His voice was a hoarse entreaty to nothing. "Who the hell are you?"